The world awoke on a Tuesday, not to the familiar shuffle of feet on pavement, but to an extraordinary silence soon replaced by a chorus of gasps and wondrous cries. It was a global phenomenon, a change as fundamental as the discovery of fire. From the bustling avenues of Tokyo to the quiet villages of the Andes, humanity had been gifted a new ability. People found that with a simple thought, a gentle push against the unseen air, they could lift from the ground. It was not a violent propulsion, but a graceful, almost instinctual ascent, as if a long-dormant part of our very being had finally stirred. A child in London, reaching for a balloon, found herself floating gently towards the ceiling, her laughter echoing in the sudden stillness of her home. This was not a dream. Across continents, news channels flickered to life with astonishing footage. Amateur videos showed figures soaring tentatively above their back gardens, their movements clumsy at first, like a fawn taking its first steps. The laws of physics, as we understood them, seemed to have been gently amended overnight. There was no great announcement from the heavens, no alien intervention. It was simply a fact. Humans could now fly. The initial moments were a mixture of disbelief and pure, unadulterated joy. For a few precious hours, the world forgot its divisions, united in a shared sense of wonder at this impossible, marvelous new reality. The first flights were short, cautious explorations of this newfound freedom. A tentative hover a few feet above the grass, a slow drift across a room, a daring glide from a second-story window to the safety of a soft lawn below. It was a skill that required no instruction manual. It felt as natural as breathing. People described a sensation of lightness, of a tether being cut, allowing them to move in 3 dimensions with an ease they had never imagined. The world, which had always been a flat plane to be traversed, suddenly revealed its verticality, its immense open volume waiting to be explored by its newly winged inhabitants. The implications were staggering, and they began to dawn on us slowly like the rising sun of this new age. The mundane tools of our existence, the stairs, the elevators, the very concept of a ground floor, were rendered quaintly obsolete in an instant. The world held its breath, poised on the brink of a revolution unlike any it had ever known. This was not merely a new form of transport. It was a fundamental alteration of the human experience. The sky, once the exclusive domain of birds and machines, had become our new, limitless playground, and our journey into it was only just beginning. The morning commute, once a crawl of metal boxes and frustrated sighs, transformed into a silent, flowing ballet. Instead of pouring onto crowded trains or sitting in traffic jams, people simply stepped out of their windows and took to the air. The sky became a vast, multi-layered highway, with different altitudes for different speeds. The low flyers were those on a leisurely trip to a local shop, drifting just above the old, now empty streets. Higher up, the high commuters soared in purposeful streams, heading towards the city centers for work. The sounds of the city changed entirely. The roar of engines was replaced by the gentle whisper of wind and the distant murmur of voices. Daily routines were entirely redrawn. Children, once walked to the school gates, now flew in chattering flocks, their colorful backpacks bobbing behind them. Their journeys were no longer confined to straight paved lines, but became joyful, swooping adventures through parks and over rooftops. Shopping for groceries involved gliding down to a local market, hovering to inspect the fresh produce, and then ascending homeward, bags dangling gently. The simple act of visiting a friend in a high-rise apartment no longer required buzzing an intercom and waiting for an elevator. One could simply fly up to their balcony for a chat, a truly personal, window-to-window connection. The very concept of a ground-level existence began to fade. Sidewalks, once the arteries of urban life, became quiet, green corridors, slowly being reclaimed by nature. People began to see the world from a new perspective, quite literally. The familiar map of their neighborhood was replaced by a 3-dimensional understanding of space. They learned the patterns of the wind, the best thermal updrafts for a lazy afternoon drift, and the quickest aerial routes to their favorite destinations. Life was no longer about the destination, but about the sheer, unbridled joy of the journey through the open air. This new mobility brought an unparalleled sense of personal freedom. The world felt smaller, more accessible. A mountain peak that once required a day's strenuous hike could now be reached in a matter of minutes for a breathtaking lunch break. A seaside visit was no longer a weekend trip, but a spontaneous evening excursion. The physical barriers that had defined our lives for millennia, rivers, ravines, even the walls of our own homes, had lost their power. We were no longer bound to the earth, but were masters of the vertical realm, our lives unfolding in the vast blue expanse above. Our cities, monuments to a ground-based species, had to evolve at a breathtaking pace. Architects and urban planners faced a challenge unlike any in history: how to redesign a metropolis for a population that lived and moved in 3 dimensions. The ground floor, once prime real estate, lost its prominence. Buildings began to transform, with new entrances appearing on every level. Balconies became the new front doors, expanded into sky verandas and landing pads adorned with soft materials for safe arrivals. The traditional skyscraper, a sealed tower accessible only from its base, became an anachronism. New structures were designed with open-air atriums, external sky bridges, and multiple public access points soaring hundreds of feet in the air. Roads and highways, the concrete veins of the old world, fell into disuse. Their vast, empty expanses were repurposed in imaginative ways. Some became long, linear parks, lush green ribbons winding through the city, offering a ground-level sanctuary for those who still chose to walk. Others were converted into urban farms, feeding the city's inhabitants. Car parks became public squares, sports fields, or the foundations for new, lighter forms of architecture. The city's footprint on the earth softened, becoming greener and quieter. The dominant feature of the urban landscape was no longer the street, but the open space between buildings, the newly claimed public commons of the sky. Public spaces were re-envisioned for a vertical society. Parks were no longer just flat expanses of grass, but included towering structures, like giant artificial trees with platforms and perches at various heights, for people to rest and socialize. These sky parks became the new community hubs, offering unparalleled views and a unique social environment. Imagine floating gardens suspended between buildings, or playgrounds with soft net-like floors where children could play safely, hundreds of feet above the ground. The very aesthetic of the city changed, shifting from a horizontal grid to a vertical, organic tapestry of homes, workplaces, and recreational spaces. The distinction between inside and outside began to blur. With the ability to enter and exit from any point, buildings became more porous, more integrated with the environment. Facades opened up, replaced by retractable walls and vast open-air terraces. Homes were designed to embrace the sky, with living spaces flowing seamlessly onto perches that offered panoramic views of the aerial activity. The city became a living, breathing organism, its inhabitants flowing through it, not like blood in arteries, but like birds in a forest, darting and gliding through its complex, beautiful, and ever-changing canopy. The advent of flight sent shockwaves through the global economy, rendering some professions obsolete while creating entirely new ones. The entire transportation industry was upended. Taxi drivers, bus drivers, and airline pilots found their skills redundant overnight. The vast industries built around manufacturing cars, trains, and planes ground to a halt. However, new roles emerged from the chaos. Aerial traffic controllers became essential, stationed in high towers to monitor the complex flows of human flight, ensuring safety in the now congested skyways. Flight instructors helped the nervous or less coordinated to master their new ability with confidence and grace. Emergency services were revolutionized. Police officers, no longer bound by gridlocked streets, could reach crime scenes in moments, pursuing suspects through the vertical urban landscape. This created a new field of aerial law enforcement, with its own tactics and challenges. Firefighters could access the upper floors of burning buildings without needing cumbersome ladders, delivering aid directly where it was needed most. Paramedics became true first responders, gliding swiftly to the side of an injured person, whether they were on a mountaintop or the balcony of a high-rise, dramatically reducing response times and saving countless lives. Delivery services transformed into a fleet of swift, silent couriers. Packages, letters, and even hot meals were no longer transported in vans, but carried directly to a customer's window or sky veranda. This efficiency reshaped commerce, but it also raised new concerns about privacy and security. Construction workers, now able to hover effortlessly, could build and repair structures with incredible precision and safety, eliminating the need for scaffolding and heavy machinery that had once defined building sites. High-altitude window cleaning became a task anyone could perform on their own home. Of course, this new world required a new set of laws. Governments scrambled to create a code of the sky. Regulations were established for flight altitudes, speed limits in residential zones, and no-fly zones around critical infrastructure like power plants and airports, which were now repurposed as logistics hubs. Questions of aerial right-of-way had to be answered. Can you fly over private property? At what altitude does a homeowner's airspace end? New laws were written to address aerial negligence and the potential for accidents. The legal and regulatory frameworks of our society, had to be rebuilt from the ground up to govern this new, boundless dimension of human activity. The gift of flight unlocked a profound and complex spectrum of human emotions. For most, the initial feeling was one of pure, unadulterated euphoria. It was the realization of an ancient dream, a liberation from the clutches of gravity that had bound our species for its entire existence. To soar through the clouds, to feel the wind rush past, to see the world spread out like a map below, it was an experience of absolute freedom. This newfound ability brought an incredible sense of empowerment and joy, a daily dose of wonder that lifted the collective human spirit. People felt more alive, more connected to the vastness and beauty of the world. However, this exhilaration was not universal. For many, the experience was tinged with a deep and persistent fear. Acrophobia, the fear of heights, became a significant social anxiety. Some individuals found themselves unable to fly, paralyzed by a primal terror of the open space beneath them. They remained grounded, watching the world take to the sky without them, feeling isolated and left behind. This created a new kind of social division, not of wealth or class, but of courage and constitution. Therapists specializing in flight anxiety became commonplace, helping people overcome their fears and join the rest of humanity in the air. The experience of flight also fostered a new sense of independence and solitude. It was possible to ascend into the quiet upper atmosphere, to find a place of peace far from the noise and bustle of the world below. For introspective souls, this was a blessing, a way to clear the mind and gain perspective. Yet for others, this same solitude could lead to feelings of detachment and loneliness. The ease of movement meant that social interactions could become more fleeting, and the deep, ground-level community bonds that had once defined neighborhoods began to change in unpredictable ways. Ultimately, flight amplified the human condition. It was a mirror reflecting our innate tendencies. The adventurous became more daring, exploring storm clouds and racing through canyons. The cautious flew in slow, deliberate patterns, never straying too far from a safe landing spot. The artists found new inspiration in the shifting cloudscapes and aerial perspectives. The power of flight did not change who we were at our core. Rather, it gave us a vast new canvas on which to express our hopes, our fears, our courage, and our creativity. It was a new dimension not just of movement, but of feeling. This newfound freedom, as miraculous as it was, came with its own set of dangers and dark possibilities. The sky, while vast, was not infinite, and the airspace above cities quickly became crowded. Mid-air collisions, though initially rare, became a serious concern as the novelty wore off and flyers became more complacent. A moment of inattention, a sudden, unexpected maneuver, could lead to a tragic accident. The image of people falling from the sky, a sight once confined to nightmares, became a grim reality that safety officials worked tirelessly to prevent. Rules of the air were not just suggestions, they were matters of life and death. The potential for misuse of this ability was a chilling prospect. Crime took on a new, terrifying dimension. Burglars could access any window, any balcony, making traditional home security obsolete. Aerial assaults or kidnappings became a frightening possibility. Law enforcement had to develop new methods of pursuit and containment in a three-dimensional environment where a suspect could disappear over a rooftop in seconds. Personal security became a paramount concern, with people installing reinforced windows and aerial alarm systems. The freedom of the sky was shadowed by the fear of what others might do with that same freedom. There were also environmental and physiological concerns. What was the long-term effect of high-altitude flight on the human body? Would exposure to increased UV radiation become a widespread health issue? The weather, once a simple consideration for what to wear, now became a critical factor in daily survival. A sudden storm, a powerful gust of wind, or a dense fog bank could prove fatal for an unprepared flyer. People had to become amateur meteorologists, constantly aware of the changing conditions of the atmosphere, their new and sometimes treacherous home. The sky was a beautiful but unforgiving wilderness. In conclusion, the gift of flight would be a profound paradox. It would grant humanity an unprecedented level of freedom, joy, and connection to the natural world, while simultaneously introducing new dangers, anxieties, and societal challenges. Our world would be reshaped in beautiful and efficient ways, but we would also have to confront the darker aspects of our own nature, now amplified with the power to escape and to intrude. Like all great leaps in our history, from the taming of fire to the splitting of the atom, the ability to fly would be a double-edged sword, offering a glimpse of utopia in one hand and a host of new perils in the other.